Hi, Kui, Neknomalita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. Today I will be talking about my October wrap-up. We are in a slightly different angle today, mostly because I wasn't liking the background of my last few videos, so I decided to change it up. Not that this is any better. Mostly my deal is that I'm looking for the best aesthetically pleasing and need to clean and just haven't felt like it. So this is what we're going with. Yeah. So October wrap up. Already I can tell that I'm not going to like this angle due to the glare on my glasses. No good angle. So October kind of flew by. I don't know where it went. I don't know what I did to make it fly by. But it was pretty cool. We had, I went to a flower dance, which is pretty late in the year to have a flower dance, but it was a rancheria that hasn't had it in over 150 years, so that was really cool. I didn't get to stay for the whole thing, but like my niece went and witnessed it because she's still debating if she wants a flower dance or not, but she still has like 6 years to figure it out, so approximately. Her mom came, which was great. I think she needed it, and danced, and I took care of my niece, which was fine. And it was great to get back into like the ceremony and the smoke smell and the camaraderie and to get my hands on regalia. I try to help out with dressing the women, because the woman that typically dresses the women, I've been trained by her before, so it was really cool to get my hands on that and just get into that familiarity of just like, okay, this is figuring out cap size and making sure everything's checked in and checked out. So it was really cool. I really enjoyed it. I am a little disappointed I didn't stay for the whole ceremony, because the final round tends to go all night, and I had work the next day, and I wish I had the foresight to like either ask for the next day off, even though it feels like staying up all night now is like a recovery time of like the whole next week. Plus, because my niece and her mom was there, my niece fell asleep rather quickly, which we kind of expected, but I ended up just, since I had to come home anyway, I just brought her home, so that was pretty cool. I still wish I would have got up early to like see the last bit of the dance though. So there's it's tough having to choose like work over ceremony, as I mean, in the old times, ceremony would have been our work, that would have been our jobs. So to kind of, and this is how colonialism works, right? It's gotten to the point where there's a lot of people who have to choose between like making a living and doing their cultural practices, which is really shitty. Or otherwise, like, it didn't really feel like Halloween came by at all. I didn't go to the pumpkin patch. I did get candy, but it's my candy. I don't like decorating for Halloween. I don't like decorating my house. I like dressing up, and I like going to the pumpkin patch, and I like making pumpkin stuff. That's one thing too. I wanted to make pumpkin chocolate chip cookies, and our oven broke. So we're supposed to be getting a new one soon, but I didn't realize just how hard it was not to use the oven. It's one of those things that just like, once it's taken away, it's just like, oh, this is difficult. And like, I know that like we can easily avoid it. Not having an oven is not the worst thing in the world. I mean, we've not used them before. It's just a convenience. But yeah, Halloween came and went, like, and I thought I had all this time to figure out a costume, and I didn't. I also went to a wedding, so that was, and tried to vlog like 15 times, and each time got self-conscious or thought it was stupid, and so canceled each and every one. So that's been my October. I want to redo. So let's get into the books that I read for October. I was a part of 2 readathons, technically 3, I guess. That's debatable. We'll have to like look into my books to see if I managed to do the 3rd one. So I participated in Spoopathon, which was a month-long readathon hosted by, I believe her name is Holly, Spoopy Hall. So this Readathon, like I said, was month long, and basically there is a haunted house that we enter into, and there are 4 paths to choose from. Each path has a different prompt to pick for your TBR. The whole point is to get out of the haunted house. And then I also participated in the Hocus Pocus Readathon. So Hocus Pocus Readathon was another month-long readathon hosted by a slew of hosts. I'll have all the information down in my description down below. And this also had teams. It had 3 teams: Team Sanderson Sister, Team Undead, and Team Trick-or-Treaters. Each team had its own set of prompts and own set of like benefits. So like I was on Team Sanderson Sister, and part of Team Sanderson Sister is that the Sanderson Sisters are trying to get souls from children, or from the Trick-or-Treaters, so we could steal a prompt from the Trick-or-Treaters if we didn't like one of our own. And the Magical Readathon, which is hosted by G over at the Book Roast. I'm not entirely sure if I was able to accomplish a book for this readathon or not. And then typically I have been doing Buzzwordathon. However, yeah, don't know if I did one for that one either this month. So for October, I read 11 books, which is so far the best in terms of quantity. Quality is debatable. We'll have to figure that out closer as when I do my end of the year stats. But 11 books, and the pages amount to 2,990, and my average rating was 3.45. I had 0 1 stars, 0 2 stars, 1 2.5 star, 4 3 stars, 1 3.5 star, and 5 4 stars, 0 5 stars. In terms of genres, I read 3 nonfiction books. 1 was a collection of essays, 1 was historical, and the other one was historical but had to do with food. 1 sci-fi, 2 horror, 1 a collection of short stories, 1 fantasy, 3 graphic novels, 1 romance, 1 fantasy, 1 horror, and 1 historical horror. Audience, I have 5 young adult and 6 adult. And then for format, I have 5 physical and 6 audio. I'm pretty happy with how many physical books I was able to get in there. So I have a TBR video if you haven't seen that, but basically these are the books that I wasn't able to get to from my TBR, which I'm really kind of disappointed by because I was excited for all of them. I am hoping that maybe at some point I can get to them in November. We'll have to see, because if you've seen that TBR, you know that one's already pretty ambitious. But I am very much still in like a spooky type of mood, and so like a lot of these I think would help with that. I also did have 2 DNFs, so right off the bat, let's just talk about those. I don't typically count my DNFs towards my stats at all. It's just, I think, interesting to know which ones I DNF ultimately. The first being The Devil Makes 3 by Tori Bovalino. This one is a fantasy horror for young adults, and we are following Tess Matheson, who only wants 3 things: to practice her cello, for her sister to be happy, and for everyone else to just leave her alone. Both her and her sister recently got into a upstanding school. It's an academy. The very specific requirements to get into this school. You have to wear uniforms, but Tess was able to get her and her sister into this school in order to hopefully get them better lives, because there has been some financial trouble within her family. And Tess works in the library at this school, and she is extremely frustrated with the amount of books or grimoires a particular Elliot Birch has been requesting, and she finds him privileged and snide and just overall does not like him or enjoy him. But when he strikes up a bargain with her to go find a very specific and forbidden grimoire, they end up unleashing the devil. So I was really disappointed that I ended up DNFing this book, because it was one that I saw when I was doing that galley at the beginning of the year. It was one that I saw and had debated on requesting for it. The cover of it is gorgeous, and the overall aesthetic seemed appealing to me. And as I was reading it, I did enjoy the library aspect of it. However, the main character, Tess Matheson. I could not. I can't. Nope. So I, off the bat, did not understand why Elliot Birch was such trouble to her. If anything, like, he should be pissed with her because of something that Tess had did and he found out and it was mistaken identity. He called her out on it and, like, she apologized or whatever, but, like, because her ego was bruised, then, like, she just, for, like, I guess throughout the whole book, just doesn't like Elliot. And, of course, like, it's like a hate to love relationship, but it's, like, almost too forcefully hate on Tess's part. I didn't understand it, and even reading reviews about this book, like, others have, like, said, going, there is no real reason why Tess hates Elliot so much, and it's constant throughout the whole book, which I'm like, that was enough for me to put it down, as well as the lack of communication. So Tess is mad at her family because of this financial issue that they had, particularly her father. Her sister doesn't know anything about it. Tess refuses to tell her, despite the fact that her sister isn't happy at this new school, but Tess is, like, in this mindset, no, you have to be, this is, like, for your own good, which is bullshit. I didn't like that whatsoever, because she won't tell her sister the truth, and won't give her sister, like, won't listen to her sister's opinion at all. So it was just extremely frustrating. I didn't like it, which sucked, because the overall aspect of it being in a library, and it being, like, they released the devil from a grimoire was really fascinating to me. That was the other thing, though. Like, Tess worked in this library with her great aunt or her aunt, and, like, right off the bat, she says she doesn't like working there. She doesn't like getting all these books for all these people. She just wants to go practice her cello. But then later she starts being all nostalgic for it, of how she loves being in the stacks. And so she was very wishy-washy. Tess, as a character, I just did not enjoy. When I originally DNF'd it, it was like a hard DNF. And then the aesthetic of it keeps bringing me back to wanting to read about the library and read about this devil that was released from her grimoire. But anytime I talk about how irritating Tess is, it's like still a hard DNF. The next book I DNF was Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. I believe this has been making its rounds on BookTube. Particularly, I believe Kayla from Books and Lala had this for her one month for her Literally Dead book club. I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember what she said about it. But this is a mystery thriller. I believe it's a domestic thriller, but basically there is women and girls going missing. Shelby Tableau is the first to go missing not long after Meredith Dickey and her 6-year-old daughter Delilah vanish just blocks away from where Shelby was last seen. Striking fear into a once peaceful community. Now, 11 years later, Delilah has shockingly returned. Everyone wants to know what happened to her, but no one is prepared for what they'll find. I guess this is a smart and chilling thriller, master of suspense, and takes domestic secrets to a whole new level, showing that some people will stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. I listened to both this one and The Devil Makes Three, I believe, were on sale in the month of October on Libro FM. So I picked them up and I couldn't get past the first chapter of Local Woman Missing. I think it's the prologue that we first see someone go missing, and then the first chapter or the second chapter, I can't quite remember, was Delilah's perspective. And after hearing from Delilah's perspective of being in a dark, dank place for years, and just how she was treated, and the fact that after reading the synopsis and knowing she comes back and knowing what else happens in that house, I am slowly figuring out which horror, what my preferences are for horror and thriller, and domestic thrillers are just not my jam. So I read one other domestic thriller and I just don't enjoy them. I don't know what it is about it. I don't know. I'm finding I like creature features or monsters, paranormal ghosts. It's almost too much for me to know that normal people can do shitty things. Even serial killers, I get that anyone could technically, it could be anyone, but a serial killer is very specific to me, that it's almost might as well be a creature feature. Domestic thrillers, it could be literally anyone, and I can't. So I DNF this one as well. So getting into the books that I did read and did finish, the first book that I read or finished in October was We Had a Little Real Estate Problem by Cliff Nestroff. This is the unheralded story of Native Americans and comedy. I have a full review of this up on my channel if you want to go check it out. But basically, Cliff Nestroff is not an Indigenous author from what I was able to understand, but is a comedy historian. And I thought this book was really well balanced in terms of history of Native Americans as in general, or like Indigenous people of North America in general. The history of them in Indigenous folks in comedy and in the entertainment industry. I thought it was a real balance of history as well as present day issues. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars, and that book doesn't count for any prompt in any of the readathons I participated in. The next book I read was All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot series. This first book in particular follows a murderbot who has figured out how to basically hack its own system so that it doesn't have to obey orders. I mean, it does because it doesn't want to be shut down or anything. The common thought process is that once a murderbot is no longer needs to obey anything, that they'll just go on a murdering spree. But this is not the case for this particular murderbot. It just wants to watch its shows and be left alone. It is hired by these humans to explore this planet for scientific research. It's supposedly an uninhabited planet. And basically, this murderbot is just there to make sure that its humans don't get hurt. It is annoyed that it has to do this. All it wants to do is watch its shows. Something ends up happening where murderbot has to protect its humans, and they're trying to figure out what's going on because another research team has stopped responding to his humans. So something's wrong. So they have to go and figure it out. I thought this was really cute in a way, oddly. Murderbot is pretty funny. Some dark humor in there. And ultimately, I just really enjoyed it. I believe it marked this as 4 stars. This was also my first prompt for the Spoopathon, in which I chose a path starting with a book less than 200 pages. This, I think, is just at 170 pages. So that worked pretty well. Next, I read The Taking of Jake Livingston. This is also one that I've seen floating around on BookTube, mostly as a TBR choice. I keep saying that, but I did hear some reviews from Steph from Stephaniebookish, Eric from Breakevenbooks, and Bear from Brody. I don't remember anything that they said aside from that. Eric from Brody put this on a list of books that gross them out. It's following Jake Livingston. He is 16 years old, queer, and lives in a working class, diverse neighborhood, but it's a far cry from St. Clair Prep, which is a ritzy school where he is one of the only black students within it. He is trying to be invisible, but is constantly being picked on. He can also see ghosts. He sees ghosts in their death loop, so the last moments of their life being relived. But then when his neighbor gets murdered by a ghost of a school shooter, Jake becomes curious and this ghost becomes curious about Jake. So I like the premise of it. The cover is just stunning. I really like it. But there were issues I felt in this book. I'm not sure I would agree with how certain things went. Mostly, I wasn't sure about this whole... I think this kind of lends itself to the stereotype that we need to watch out for the quiet kids in high schools. That the quiet kids are going to shoot up the class or whatever. So this was a stigma that in the early 2000s and the 90s, it started, I believe, after Columbine. And I have some friends that had issues with this because they were the oddballs, nerdy, quiet kids in school. And I apologize for the weird change in lighting. I'm using natural light, and it's a partially cloudy day. But they had issues in school because of this warning to watch out for the quiet kids. So they were immediately kind of labeled as like potential troublemakers. This lends itself to that in a way. Mostly because Jake Livingston is being picked on in school, and it gets to the point where he has this kind of just explosive moment of being over it, which was great in a way, but at the same time it was just like I think it could have gone better. I understand the frustration being in a high school that had hardly any students of color in it. Thought it could have gone better, honestly. Though I think that's part of the narration as well, though, just like how long can someone really put up with something like this. What I did enjoy, though, was when Jake Livingston did finally stand up for himself, not in the explosive way, but in the way that he ends up calling out his principal. That I appreciated. There were also just aspects within this book that didn't click with me. There were some fight scenes with the ghost that I was just like not understanding. It just kind of felt almost too animated or too, I don't know. It just, honestly, it reminded me of an anime, which is like fine if you enjoy that. I just thought it just kind of brought me out of the book. So I don't know. I think I was hoping for one thing and didn't get it from this book. I kept thinking there was going to be like a found friend, found family aspect to this, and there really wasn't. I liked the growth that Jake had, but I thought it was a little slow. So I gave this, I believe, 3 stars. Wasn't bad, wasn't my favorite, but I do really enjoy the art to it, and this one counted for the prompt. Something for Spoopathon, it was something you fear, which ghosts and possessions tend to fear me. Especially, there was moments in here too, like I didn't get grossed out like Bear did in certain areas, but there were aspects of this book where it was a bit creepy, particularly when it was just like, you know, the shadows are moving and you know that something's in them. Yeah. It also worked for a couple Hocus Pocus readathon or prompts, though I think we weren't able to double up on it. So this was one of the ones that I snagged for the Hocus Pocus readathon. Being on Sanderson's sister, I was able to snag a prompt from the Trick-or-Treaters, and I believe the one I snagged was a book featuring high schoolers, and they're in high school. So the book I read was Fangs by Sarah Anderson. Sarah Anderson is an online comic book artist or comic artist. She's produced some comic books, graphic novels before that I've read from and really enjoyed. I really like how the red's showing up in the camera. And this one is a little different from her regular style. We are following a vampire and a werewolf as they begin and enter into a relationship with each other. This was on a lot of people's October TBR, so I'm interested to see what other people think, but I thought this was just okay. It reminds me of another graphic novel that I read alongside Sarah Anderson. Cannot for the life of me remember the name of it, but I'll have it here. But basically, it's just kind of like that one and this one kind of go through like the mundaneness of a relationship, the ups and downs of it, like the kind of boring bits and pieces that it doesn't always have to be so flashy. And this one just happens to be that the couple is a werewolf and a vampire. So there's that element to it. But yeah, I thought it was cute. I thought it was okay, but I thought it could have been pushed more. There was some dark humor in here, and there was a couple of moments that actually reminded me of my partner. This one counts for graphic novel for Spoopathon and doesn't count for anything in Hocus Pocus. The next book I read was also on sale, I believe. Either that or it was my credit for Lyra FM. I can't quite remember. But that is The Corpse Queen by Heather Herman. This one is following Molly Green after her best friend dies. Orphaned Molly Green is sent off to live with her aunt. Molly Green doesn't really believe this person's her aunt, just someone who was willing to donate to the church of the orphanage that she was in for some free labor. But when she meets her aunt, she realizes that she was an estranged aunt who is very eccentric and wealthy. Ava, her aunt, is willing to share her eccentricities and her wealth for a price. She has built an empire on grave robbing and selling corpses to anatomists and anatomy students in order for them to practice on. So I believe this was in early 1900s, late 1800s. This is like a historical horror. I really enjoyed reading this, particularly after reading Dark Archives by Megan Rosenblum, as there was some things that like I immediately recognized as, oh, these are resurrectionists. So it was really cool in that sense. It was a little gruesome in terms of the descriptions of injuries, death, as well as decomposition. I wasn't sure about the storyline itself. Was enjoying it, and then it was going for a trope. It felt to me that it was going to a trope that I don't tend to enjoy, and almost DNF'd it. And then it completely did a 180 and went somewhere else with it, to the point where after reading the book, I'm like, oh, that wasn't that bad, but I really just that teaser in the middle, I just did not enjoy. So I also just kind of felt like the ending was rushed. I don't know. There were some issues in this book for me. But I do really enjoy the cover of this book, and I liked the aspects of it that had to do with resurrectionists. It was also pretty creepy when it had to do with like a particular villain in here called the Tooth Fairy. That was, oh my goodness. Teeth, man. Like, I can't handle that. I don't care if the person that they're taking it out of is dead. It bugs me. So, yeah, it wasn't too bad. Ultimately not as scary as I would have hoped, and ultimately wish it didn't have that little twist in the middle, but I had this originally at a 3. I think I'm bringing it down to a 2.5, which still isn't necessarily a bad rating, but Queen worked for the Spoopathon for new genre, a historical horror, which I would like to get more into. I think it would be really interesting, as well as spooky. So, and then it also, for Hocus Pocus Readathon, it worked for the prompt book featuring readers, as Molly Green utilized her aunt's library really well. So, and that was another thing that I had enjoyed about it, was that Molly Green wanted to be a doctor in a time where it was laughable for women to take up such a profession. So, next I read another nonfiction, and that was Animal Vegetable Junk by Mark Bittman, A History of Food from Sustainable to Suicidal. This one I really enjoyed. I had been seeing it around in my local bookstore for a while, and it was available through my library, so I was really excited. And after listening to it, I had to get a copy. So I like listening to nonfiction first and then getting a physical copy later if I feel like I can or want to reference it, particularly if I enjoyed the book, mostly because nonfiction can be a little expensive. But this one, I really enjoyed the history that Mark Bittman took us through in terms of food and agriculture and how it had changed throughout history. Do really enjoy, particularly, is that with nonfiction, I'm constantly hesitant just because it's always like, okay, whose voices are you going to include? And he did end up including like some history of indigenous people of the Americas. So that was pretty cool. And the fact that like he recognized that our way of farming or agriculture was and is better than what it is now. And it was just... It's one of those books, though, that, like, after reading, you're kind of looking at everything you eat and going, yeah, probably shouldn't have bought that. And ultimately, in a way, this was pretty spooky for the season, just because... spooky in general, because, and just overall scary, because it just proves that our government, as well as, and food in general, has always been, in terms of a colonizer or white colonizer mindset, has always been for profit, not to feed the people. So, and it was just a really good learning experience in terms of figuring out like why certain things are now just considered junk even though we thought they were healthy. It particularly was really interesting to me as he talked about the different varieties of plants and how, not the different varieties, but like the abundance of particular plants and how we've always kind of genetically modified things, but now it's to the point where they no longer hold the nutrients that they once did. And the food industry could very well be feeding into the pharmaceutical industry, as now we have to add vitamins into food, into our resources, and into ourselves because we're lacking the proper nutrients from the food that would have given this stuff. So ultimately, it was a really good book, and it can get frustrating, but I really did enjoy it. I hope to look more into food. I did talk about this briefly in, I believe, my TBR / recommendation list for November, as well as briefly in my nonfiction on BookTube tab. So, and this worked for Spoopathon for a nonfiction, as well as Something You Fear, which is food security. Another thing that I did enjoy about this book was that when books deal with climate change, I've noticed that this is a change within books that talk about climate change, because before it was always like doom, 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 we need to stop doing these things, and it was very just kind of disheartening and scary. And books I've noticed have recently started going, yeah, it's doom, but look at these good things that people are doing. If we can keep doing that and we can push it into a larger, like, if we can get everyone to get on board with this, then we'll, like, positive outcome, which is great, because it leaves this like, oh, we can still fix this, we're not doomed. So that's always a bit more pleasant to hear. Next, I read Kim Reaper, Volume 1, Grim Beginnings by Sarah Graley. Sarah Graley is another online comic artist that I have enjoyed and I do follow on Instagram. I don't know if this is her first graphic novel, but in this one we are following Kim, and who is has a part-time job as a Grim Reaper, and Becca, who is this lovely lady who has the biggest crush on Kim. Shenanigans ensue as Becca learns what Kim does and kind of gets pulled into the underworld. So I like the premise of this, but ultimately this I had the same problem with as Moonstruck. I felt that Becca, everyone was just over dramatic to me. Becca in particular, I did not like the fact that she didn't like Kim's job and just refused to even talk to her until she changed her job. Despite the fact that Kim was like, okay, I really enjoy this job. I know I can be a little reckless, but like, I really do enjoy my job and I need my job. So it was just kind of frustrating to me that Becca would just like give Kim an ultimatum like that, and it was just like not healthy. I felt like I've always enjoyed the expressions that Sarah Graley is able to get into her characters. It's always really relatively funny. But yeah, there was just certain issues that I had that like I don't think I was ever really like rooting for them as a couple, just because I felt like Becca had to work on some issues. And Kim felt so confident until Becca came along, and then it was just like, well, what happened to Kim's confidence? Which I get, like, it can happen, like, that happens, but it didn't make me root for them as a couple. So, but I am interested to see where this series goes. There are some relatively dark humor in here. Also, it just ultimately felt like nothing was taken seriously. So like at one point Kim has to deal with the Grim Council, and the whole time they just want Kim as a Grim Reaper because she has so much potential. But like they end up having a feud with each other, but it's like nothing ever felt like it was taken seriously. Like it never really felt like anyone was in danger. There was no real risk. Next, I read Something Is Killing the Children by James Tignon IV, Werther de la Dera, and Michael Muerto. This is a horror graphic novel that I enjoyed more than I thought I would. I was hoping I would, and I did. The style is decent. It's very sketchy and dark, but it fits well with the theme of the graphic novel. I really did. I wanted a spooky read and I got it. We are going into this town who has children disappearing. It was once peaceful, but the children are going missing or being found dead. or dismembered. Survivors have very surreal descriptions that the adults don't quite believe. They still think it's a person, but when Erica Slaughter comes into town, she kills monsters and she believes these children. And she's able to see and kill these monsters that the children are talking about. And she bears the cost because it has to be done. This was creepy. It was like dark. I really did enjoy it. There are graphic depictions of, so content warning, children are dying. So there's death of children, graphic depictions of blood, gore, dismemberment. I think it was a little frustrating. I get that this is part of like to help us as an audience know just how dangerous this can be. But there was like 2 instances where like side characters were a hindrance to the main character, Erica Slaughter, because they didn't know what they were getting into. So it kind of like made it so that the plot was very like stop and go. And it was a little frustrating. Lack of diversity noticeable. I believe there was like 1 person of color in here. So that I kind of dinged. But ultimately did enjoy this. Hope to get the next volumes. I didn't count any of my either of these 2 for any prompts in the readathons, so they were just fun reads. I think it was because I was just taking so long to read another physical book that I was just wanting a booster. So a nice quick read. Yeah. Next, I read Slasher Girls and Monster Boys. Story selected by April Genevieve Tuchok. Classic Tales, Brand New Nightmares. So this one I have had on my TBR for a while. I remember Kayla from Booksandlala talking about this years ago and purchased it because of that. I liked this better than I thought I would. There were some stories better than others. My favorite stories in here are In the Forest, Dark and Deep by Carrie Ryan, Emmeline by Kat Winters, Stitches by A.G. Howard, and On the I-5 by Kendar Blake. I felt though that like those last 2 Stitches and On the I-5 could have been switched around. I felt Stitches was a bit stronger of an ending. Everything else, it wasn't bad, but there was some that like But those 4 in particular gave me like the spooky vibes that I was looking for. So I enjoyed that, and I'm finally just glad to finally have gotten to this. Next, I read The Forest of Stolen Girls by June Her. This one I was really kind of excited for. The cover is gorgeous and it's really enticing. We're following, this is like another historical fantasy horror. No, historical mystery horror is what it was. But it's in 1426. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Joseon. Juani's family has never been the same since she and her younger sister went missing in the forest and were later found unconscious near a gruesome crime scene. Years later, Detective Min, Juani's father, learns 13 girls have recently disappeared from the same forest that nearly stole his daughters. He travels to their hometown on the island of Jeju to investigate, only to vanish as well. Determined to find her father and solve the case that tore their family apart, Juani returns home to pick up the trail as she digs into secrets of the small village and collides with her now estranged sister, Mei Wall. Juani comes to realize that the answer could lie within her own buried memories of what happened in the forest all those years ago. I struggled to read this. It was really slow, in my opinion, and wasn't that frightening, or it was more of a mystery than it was a horror at all. I had, looking at Goodreads, it's puts it as a mystery. I enjoyed the author's note of basically this was when the Ming Dynasty was stealing girls or like snagging up girls to put into like a sex trade. It was really interesting that like what this was based off of. Oh, it was based off of the stories of Korean women and girls who were trafficked during World War II, commonly known as comfort women. June Her had learned that Korean girls had been traded long before then. and she came across the term Kongnyo, which refers to beautiful women who were taken from their homes and given up as a human tribute. So that's what this was like based off of. Ultimately, I had a hard time with Hwani just because I didn't agree with some of her viewpoints, because her and her sister are estranged from each other. But her sister, Maywal, had stayed on the island of Jeju and had a complicated relationship with their father, while Hwani looked up to her father, did anything she could to please him, and didn't understand why Maywal, like, would not understand why Maywal had such an issue with him, or wouldn't help her find out what happened. And, like, kept saying that Maywal's emotions were getting in the way, and it was just like, yeah. I don't know. It was just, it was meh. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it that much. I do like the inspiration for it. I think it's really important. But yeah, ultimately, I gave this a 2.5 stars, and it became a sort of chore to keep reading it, honestly, which kind of sucked. So it took me a while to get into it. I kept thinking as I was reading it, you know, once you finally get a bike that, like, has gears to it, that, like, when you pedal backwards, you're not just braking, you're just kind of spinning the chain. But as you, like, are trying to figure out what gear to be in and what on the particular terrain you're on, that's what it felt like. It was just like I couldn't quite figure out what gear this was on. Like, it was a smooth and easy ride. It was like an easy read, but it wasn't great. I don't know why I used that, but yeah. And then finally, my last book of the month, which also took me all month to read, was White Magic by Alyssa Washida. I did start this at the beginning of the month and then paused it because I wanted to get into spookier reads, and then finished it. But it was just kind of another meh. This was a collection of essays by Alyssa Washida that, like, kind of going over her life. This is a sort of memoir, as she's been surrounded by cheap facsimiles of native spiritual tools and occult trends. And she kind of just looks into that, as well as her own trauma. Some of it was really interesting. I felt like it was a bit chaotic in terms of thought process. So these are, like, a bunch of essays, just kind of, I'm sure they're put together in a particular way, but it didn't make sense to me. I felt like it got strong, like, this part of the book, like, this far in, and then it lost me again. So I don't know if this just wasn't for me. There was a lot of important things I thought that Alyssa Washida had to say. I am still curious about her writing, and after reading this book, understand that she is a writer, like, that she has other works out, so I'm interested to see what else she has. This one just didn't quite click for me. I do really enjoy the cover of this, and thank you to Tin House for sending me this finished copy. It just didn't click well with me. So this was what I read for the month of October. If you've read any of these books, please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Please, no spoilers. If you've made it this far, remember to give this video a thumbs up if you have yet to do so already. Subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notified when I post more content. Yeah, I kind of want to redo October. Otherwise, I hope that you're doing well and in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading, and I will see you in another video very soon. Ciao.